Hello and welcome to today's session where I'm going to be chatting to Amy Engleman, who's a local counsellor and psychotherapist. So I'm just going to leave her to introduce herself properly and tell you a bit more about what she does.
Good morning, good afternoon, hello, whenever you're watching this. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you, Grace. I am a local psychotherapist, as Grace says, and I'm currently working with everyone via Zoom, which has been a blessing and a wonderful thing. I specialise in working with people who have been through trauma, but I work with a big wide range of people, male, female, any adults that are going through challenges, big issues in their life, or sometimes things that just get a little bit stuck. That's one of the things we often talk about, that people feel stuck. That seems to happen a lot at the moment.
So I asked Amy to come on board this program because I feel like it's really, really important to talk about your recovery from a mental health perspective, as well as obviously there's a big focus from what I know about in terms of physical health. And I really wanted to just get kind of some professional advice for you about what's normal in those first few months, and even maybe a little bit, maybe you wouldn't mind talking, Amy, about how things go, what's normal going forward and as kids get older too, because I think the challenges just change as kids get older. And I mean, for me, it's never been more intense than it was in the fourth trimester, which is why I created this course. But also to kind of just to give people a bit of an overview of how you feel like people tools that they can use to cope during motherhood, and specifically in the fourth trimester. I know that's a big question.
That's a huge question.
But maybe we could start with what are some of the normal emotions that mums are likely to feel in the first few weeks after their baby arrives?
Yeah. Well, do you know what? Just the fact that you posed that first question and it felt so big, that's how motherhood can feel at that start, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what do we do with this huge thing, this new thing? And, the journey of pregnancy can create a lot of attention for us from other people, from our own selves, just the focus that goes into that build up of this event, this birth, this, potentially hugely precious event. And it can feel like a layered build up. And very often we've got a lot of input. And input can be one of those things that can be really, really helpful, or actually it can produce a lot of anxiety and stress for us. And one of the things that's always worth talking about is how much we take on board of other people. I'm not an expert of your children. I'm not an expert on anybody's children. We are our own best expert. And very often when we're getting lots and lots of input from other people, we lose that sense of intuition that we have, that we will be able to find the best answer for ourselves. And we could have been really very successful and proficient in lots of other areas of our life, what we're doing professionally, what we're doing in our relationship. But then when this idea of the baby arrives, that internal kind of switch of, I know what's best, can sometimes feel like it's switched off. That we have to always look outside ourselves to find out what's the next move, what are we supposed to be doing, what's the new thing, what's the best thing. And when we constantly look outside ourselves, the amount of input we get can feel quite overwhelming. And that's really normal in those early stages, isn't it? When we start anything new, especially when suddenly we've got this person that's looking at us going, okay, it's all down to you now. It can feel like a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's about that process of learning to discern who we listen to, how much we let in, and giving ourselves time to start to learn what we need and what they need. And that doesn't always happen instantly. When you get any sort of new relationship, whether it's with another adult or new friendships or even new jobs, you don't start that first day and know everything about what's going on. It's a learning process, isn't it? And it's not something that always happens straight away that we know what to do. So it's offering ourselves that real sense of, okay, what do I need? What does baby need? And do I really need to listen to all this quite often noise of other people saying, oh, I did this and I did that. And people very often have really good intentions, but that can feel really overwhelming. When we start into that process of motherhood, there can be a real feeling sometimes that we don't quite recognise ourselves. You know, we've spent years and years doing all the things that we're doing, and then motherhood kind of arrives with a bump quite often. And not all of us have the burst that we want, this kind of imagined process that's going to happen. So there's sometimes some time of adjustment physically, mentally, emotionally after the birth. But also all those things that we've been doing prior to having our children quite often get put on hold. Our jobs, our routines, our, you know, let's go out for dinner, or let's spend time with our partners, or let's go to the gym. All these things that we were really used to happening very often stop for that period of time. And it's a different period of time for everyone. Some people find their kind of sense of self and their feeling of who they are really quickly afterwards. But some of us, it takes quite a long time, and that can be quite unsettling. I don't know if you found this. You often find mothers just don't quite know how to be themselves and be the mother. Like, where do I exist with all this? What does it all feel like? Where do I belong?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been true for me. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people that can identify with that if they've had children before watching this. But can you talk a bit about the concept of a good enough parent? Because that's something that we've talked about before, and that I think is a really, really helpful thing. I think a lot of people, when baby arrives, feel like this sense of needing to be the perfect parent. So can you just talk a bit about what a good enough parent is and what that means?
Yeah, I think it's completely normal to want to be a great parent, you know, to want to do the best you absolutely can be. And in those early stages, we don't really know what that looks like yet because we're doing everything for the first time very often. And, you know, if that real sense of love and desire for our child has kicked in, which it doesn't always, there can be a real sense of, wow, I want to get this perfect. I want to be the best parent I can be. And that doesn't necessarily come from outside. That comes from a real kind of sense of urgency to not make mistakes, not make errors. Whatever place you arrive as that new parent, we very often bring our experience of being parented by our parents, whether we had two parents, one parent, you know, big selection of people caring for us. What we experience from our early years creates very often a blueprint of how we're going to want to parent. And whether that's we had great parents and we want to emulate, or our parents struggled and didn't get it right, and then we look back and we go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make that mistake because that really hurt me. So that can put quite a lot of pressure on us to perform at this kind of high level of parenting, or whichever way you want to look at it. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable in any life or in any kind of setting to be perfect. It's just not possible. But we can create this real sense of pressure to be perfect, to be great, to not harm, to not do wrong, to not make errors. And one that creates a lot of pressure and quite often a lot of anxiety, but it's completely unrealistic because there won't have been anything that you've done in your life prior that you haven't made mistakes. Now, the concept of the good enough mother is that there's a need to not be perfect. There's a need to not do everything perfect in order for our children growing up to realize that it's important to make mistakes. And it's not get everything right all the time. When we create that kind of division between perfection and trying our best, it creates a sort of gap of opportunity for learning. As us as parents, we can learn more when we make mistakes. We look at it and we go, okay, that didn't really work for us. What do I need? But also, if the children get older and they start to look at us as human beings, and they start to understand how we work, what good people look like, what kind people look like, what empathetic people look like, they look up at us and they see that we screw up sometimes. and that the world keeps turning, and that we make a mistake and we can be vulnerable and everything's generally okay. And learning that we can make mistakes, and sometimes the milk will spill over and sometimes they'll drop stuff, and we still love them and it's okay. We don't have to be perfect all the time. And children learn by watching. They hear all the stuff we say. Well, they hear some of it just goes on one ear and out the other, but they hear it. But what they're doing very often is they're watching, they're learning to mirror. So that element of being good enough is about creating the space for learning, creating the space for mistakes, creating the space for wisdom, really. But this bar of perfection, it's really, really hard work. And we all do it occasionally, but it's really tough.